All right, people, what's up? So let's be real. I'm gonna be blocking in a portrait right now in egg tempera. I have like that much experience with egg tempera. It's something I've kind of toyed around with, and I've done a couple kind of tests on canvas and stuff. But I really, it's not a medium I'm familiar with. I'm very optimistic about it, but it's not a medium I'm familiar with. By the way, just so you know, this is like going on Patreon. This is going on YouTube and on Instagram. So, whichever platform you're on, the best version that you can watch, the 4K versions on Patreon and YouTube. But I'm just gonna dive in and kind of see what happens. If you guys have questions and stuff, just let me know, and I'll kind of chat about them while I'm working. So, cheers. Of course, I knew MJ would be here. Had no doubt in my mind. I guess you guys can all see the palette cam as well. At least all of you on YouTube. For those of you watching on Insta, just go ahead and switch over to YouTube if you want, and you can check out the 4K stream there, because you're kind of getting right now like a little bit of a. Your stream is not as like high quality, but anyway. So yeah, if there's any questions that come in from anybody watching, just let me know, and I'll get to them in the time that I can. Like I said, this is going to be just a block in. I'm probably going to treat it like mostly not quite monochromatic. Like as you can see, like I have a limited palette here, so I have like white, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, and black. So I have like a little bit of color on my palette. But the conception of the painting, in a way, is going to be quite muted, at least for the block in. Not quite a grisaille, but a little bit of like kind of a, I would call like a dead coloring in a way. And I'm just using my like synthetic mongoose hair brush here to kind of block in. I just have like a single kind of round brush. I guess you can see that there. So let's just see what happens. You guys are going to be just as surprised as like I am as to like what we get up to here in terms of like progress. Yeah. By the way, totally daunting to to kind of experiment live. Let's see. So, like I said, I'm gonna start with like values that are a little bit kind of in the middle of like where I know they're gonna be eventually, and I just want to kind of get some of my shapes established, some of the major shapes and kind of planes of the head established straight away before I get to anything too specific. Now, the thing about this experiment, by the way, is that it's totally true to experimentation, in the sense that like I don't even necessarily. I mean, I know a little bit of like I've primed this with PVA, so I know a little bit of how that's going to react. But I wouldn't say that I'm like really super knowledgeable about how it's going to react either. So yeah, we're gonna find out. We're gonna find out together. All right. So a couple of questions coming in. MJ's asking, how do you go about creating the illusion of light and shadow in a quick sketch? Also, any advice on quick sketching on white paper? Yeah, actually, MJ, I think I actually might have answered you a couple times about this on other platforms, but it's worth saying here. Like, if you're sketching on white paper, obviously the difficulty is that you have that sense of like flatness in the material, which is to say, like if you're working on tone paper, you can like pull out with white chalk some of the highlights like I've kind of done here, but you don't have a way to do that on a white paper, and so eventually I think it's highly advantageous for you to like find a way to do that essentially, and that's going to mean I think basically kind of toning over the surface like dry with graphite or something. Yeah, like by the way, hopefully nobody thinks this was going to be like super quick and I was going to like splash all of the color and value in really fast. In general, that's not really how I work. So this is going to be like the slow, meticulous version of painting, and I think eventually we'll come to an interesting place with it. At this point, like I'm really probably just treating it like kind of a drawing medium. I'm just going to make some shapes, and hopefully those shapes will come to describe my model. Remy Sapin on YouTube is asking, so how about that cold passion you were talking about? Yeah, what Remy might be mentioning is that there's like a story that goes along with the cold passion idea, right? Like, so there's this, like, I guess I'll synopsize, like what cold passion is essentially what we're talking about is bringing the same like approach every day to your studies, for instance, right? So like hot passion is like you get really excited on the first day and you like, you show up and you're full of enthusiasm and all that stuff, and then as soon as you like realize how difficult something is, that hot passion kind of ebbs away. Cold passion, of course, the alternative then would just be that you are that you're like kind of committed to this thing and you bring an equal measure of intensity over time, which is actually what it takes to get good at something, right? Is actually the equal measure of effort. I used to teach in a 3-year program, and so we'd always have students that would come in on the first day and they'd be like, Stephen, like I'm all the way in, and like I'm so committed to this and stuff, and they're expressing like that hot passion. They're going like, I'm so into what this thing is. And not always, but I think you could say that in general, those would often be the people that would like kind of fade away a little bit over time. So they're kind of relying on that hot passion to kind of like keep them going. And a lot of times, it's just not sustainable, I guess. I mean, that's my take on it. Obviously everybody's got like bit of a different thing going on, so maybe there's people who can sustain that hot passion. I can just speak to my experiences with students and so on. But yeah, so the story about hot passion actually involves a very good friend of mine, Stephen Forster, who you can find him on IG. You can find him in the analog world. He is the director of the Long Island Academy of Fine Art, referred to as LIAFA, and that's in Glen Cove. I used to teach workshops there. A lot of artists teach workshops there and other things. So really a nice place, great community. Met a lot of really wonderful people out there, and I'll probably continue to work with them in some way in the future as well. But all of that aside, to say that Steve studied. Actually, I don't know if I can like tell this story. There's like institutions involved and like other people. I guess like I can be relatively anonymous about it. Yeah, I'm going to leave the institution names out of it. So he studied at a school in New York, a very prominent school in New York, and one of his instructors. Everybody was like hanging around, like at lunch, like talking about like painting and art, etc. And the conversation was going on about like like passion and excitement and like passion in art, like talking about like great Baroque artists like Bernini and Caravaggio, and like how their work was, it's so full of passion and like excitement. And that's like understandable. Like that's what really that was about. If you go to like St. Peter's and you look at the Michelangelo's Pietà, this is about like passion and feeling and emotion. And this guy, this teacher that was like kind of listening in on the conversation a bit was like, And this guy, like, his artwork was like really it really has that like modern sense of like artwork is like taking the piss out of something, right? Like it's very, in a way, it's almost like sarcastic. Um, and he interjects into the conversation that's all about passion and being baroque and like all this stuff, and he's like, I guess I'm just about that cold passion, like just like to be like a contrarian, you know. And so, you know, hearing that story, you know, you have a bit of a laugh about it. You know, like this guy is just being, you know, he's just being a bit of a contrarian, just to like be a contrarian. Um, and so then eventually, like, Steve tells me this story, and you know, we're having a laugh about it or whatever. And I'm thinking about like cold passion, like it just kind of stuck with me. And I don't know if this is like what he meant about it. Like I think in a way, you know, it's like one of those things where the person saying it, I'm not even sure that the person saying it like intended it this way. But eventually the way I started thinking about it was, you know, like cold passion is that answer to consistency, right? And that's what I've kind of taken it to mean eventually, and that's how it's become actually something like really meaningful to me. Is that saying that we're not talking about like cold passion that's just like a robotic like approach to life or interaction, but more that cold passion is like the consistent application of your effort over time, um, which for me is like I think it's a very meaningful subject for me. It's something that for sure, you know, like I am saying all the time to students, you know, and I used to get this a lot. I used to teach an crochet class at the Florence Academy, which is a sculpture class where you're like building the body from the inside out. Students get really excited about it. There's a lot of hot passion surrounding that class. Like students will come up, I want to enter the class early. I want to, you know, I want to do crochet, and you know, if that student was like had done a lot of their studies and preliminary projects and things, or they were following along the visual anatomy course very well, I'd say, yeah, sure, you know, go ahead. Let's, you know, we'll put you into crochet early, and you can, instead of the 99 hours that the class is normally, you know, you'll have like a lot longer. Um, but a lot of times, and I kind of knew this, you know, before like really answering the request, but a lot of times those people that were like really on fire to get into the crochet class sooner rather than later, a lot of times that hot passion would kind of ebb away, and those would be the ones with like the incomplete sculptures, like just hanging out in the class, um, you know, forever. So anyway, like, you know, it just illustrates to me really well this need for this need for consistency. Essentially, you know, that's really how you kind of get better at something. You know, it's just repetition and effort over time, and if you have those things to give, you know, like you can almost guarantee progress. Can't guarantee like greatness, um, but you can guarantee progress for sure. Yeah, so I went on a long time about that, and there's a bunch of other questions that have come in. William Blake is asking about what surface this is on. This is on a paper, the Stonehenge paper, stretched over a stretched over a cradled wood panel, and then I've toned it with ink, and then after that, I have I put a layer of PVA over the top of it, which I did like a little drawing on top of, and then, you know, I think that's kind of essentially all that you need to know about it. The paper stretching process, by the way, a lot of people like kind of get into that, want to know about that and stuff, and that's all on my Patreon page. There's a kind of walkthrough to like show you everything that kind of that's about, right? Yeah, so stretching paper I think is a really if you watch my live streams, you know, I talk about that a lot because I use it a lot, and I think it's really nice actually. So let's see. Other questions. Luxio says, you haven't started, but I can see how amazing this will turn out. Luxio, it's good that you have faith in what I'm doing, because this is a grand experiment here. I mean, I have worked in other like aqueous mediums before, like I've worked in watercolor and things like that. But you know, tempera, of course, is like a very it's a very different kind of situation. It's not exactly. I mean, you can water it down, obviously, but it's not exactly like, you know, not at all really, probably like watercolor painting in that, you know, it has that sense of opacity that like allows you to create a lot of different effects that maybe watercolor. Uh, well, they're just different in watercolor, aren't they? Yeah. So let's see. Gention Quelly is saying, I'm painting a skull in oils. Watching your videos helped me so much. Yeah, very cool, man. A lot of this stuff, you know, a lot of this stuff applies across mediums, and that's like I think the kind of nice thing um, about kind of learning about painting in this way, or drawing in this way, is that, you know, if you're painting in oil, right? Guess what? Like, you're gonna be drawing too. So you know, all this stuff is like really, really necessary. No matter what kind of material you're using, like proportion is proportion. You know, if you can't get it there, chances are you're not gonna get it in the other as well. I mean, there's a few things. Maybe you could say color is a little bit different between mediums. Like maybe you can manage color really well in oil, but not in other. Anyway, whatever. The point is, you got to draw like across mediums, and if you're working in different mediums, you're bound to need to know that as well. Yeah, so like I'm almost blocked in. I mean, kinda, sorta. I'll start getting into that light shape pretty soon, which is that's where the cool stuff is happening. That's what like everybody wants to get to. By the way, like I'm not. Eventually, like I'll probably release like an edited version of this project, in which I'll have like the source image or something like actually on screen as well, so you can kind of see what I'm doing. It's a former student of mine and Cornelia's, and I haven't kind of like she was Cornelia. My wife took a bunch of really great source imagery of all these students that we were working with. They're just fantastic people, and we enjoy like working from those images so much. But I haven't like kind of cleared it with her like that I'm using it like for a broadcast like this. So that's why it's not on screen as of now. Is I want to just double check with her that she's like kind of totally okay about that. Yeah, so I'm just gonna like push things around a little bit with my palette knife just to kind of see what happens, see what like textures come out of that. Again, this is very much in the spirit of experimentation. This mug, by the way, was a gift from Kelsey Fisher, another student. I think you can find her on IG as well. Like everybody's on IG nowadays. Like everybody's on Instagram. So it's nice to kind of give people like shout outs and stuff. Yeah, if I mention them on the air. So another question. Oh no, a lot of questions. Let's see. Alec Parsons says, how quickly does the egg temper dry? Can it reactivate after it's dried? He's never tried it. To me, it seems like obviously it dries through like a kind of evaporation, right? Where like oil paint will dry through oxidation. This egg tempera is drying. I wonder actually if there's any like form of, not exactly polymerization, but any form of like drying that is not evaporation based, but seems pretty consistent to most water-based mediums. Like probably it's faster than acrylic. You know, it seems to me like similar to watercolor, just in terms of like the actual speed of the drying, because but because like watercolor will have like a lot more actual water um, in the mixture that you're applying to the paper, that it will seem to dry like a little bit slower, but that's just because of like the quantity of water. Much like with oil paint, where oil paint, like the more oil you have, like the slower that's going to dry. There's a couple of people on IG, on Instagram, asking about like whether they can watch this later and stuff. I usually don't post these videos to Instagram, like long form videos, because they don't do very well, and in a way they tend to like detract a little bit from your reach there. But if you want to watch them, they're totally available on YouTube to watch indefinitely. They'll be there. I mean, until probably like if I release this as like something on Patreon as well, probably have to like take it off of YouTube, but it'll be there for a minute, so you can like check it out in its full. By the way, and also like it's gonna be, that's where you're gonna find it in 4K as well. So that's also a benefit to watch it on YouTube. Let's see, Varun Tuslian. Wow, I'm probably not pronouncing that right. Says, I just discovered you through Proco and you're my hero now, thanks. MJ is asking, how do you judge the hardest and softest edge? Well, I mean, that's just a matter of, it's just a matter of comparison. I mean, you know, a similar question to this would be like, how do you judge the darkest dark and the lightest light? I mean, you just have to, at that point, like kind of trust your intuition. I remember when I first started out, like drawing and painting, yeah, it was kind of like, I would like choose the lightest light, but I wouldn't feel like super confident. Like I know, like, yeah, that I'm correct in choosing that, I guess. So it was kind of like a guess, like, is this the lightest light? Seems like the lightest light. But, you know, it's one of those things where I feel like more or less, it's not like relevant whether it's the lightest light or close to the lightest light. Like if you get in the neighborhood of being correct about the lightest light, I think you're mostly okay. And we're talking about like very small like value shifts and things that I think eventually, like I said, eventually like don't matter so much. If you're like way off, like obviously that's a problem. But if you're in the right neighborhood, I think you're probably pretty okay, you know. And it's the same thing with edges. Like, just start with, you know, and this is the thing too. Is like a lot of times with students, because you're trying to figure this stuff out. Like, you're looking at it as like something that you get right when you start, but really, you start a relationship of values that evolves over time, and as time goes on, then you know you get closer and closer to the truth. And so, you know, just start it out by choosing one thing that's like lighter than another thing that's like darker than another, and then you expand that relationship outward from there. Edges are not different. You're gonna do the same thing. You're gonna search for like where a relatively sharp edge is and where, you know, a relatively like harder edge is. That's all there is to it. So I'm kind of establishing like some of the, by the way, speak of the devil, like I'm establishing some of like the kind of lighter values just to get like an idea of like what the overall like value situation is. The thing about establishing a highlight is it means like you understand like everything to the left of the right or the right of it, you know, it's going to get a little bit darker. But what I need to do here, ooh, and this is tough. This is like dicey territory. I need to kind of like establish bigger light areas. So like I need to establish like the whole kind of light shape. And what I'm seeing so far from the tempera is that it dries probably a little bit more transparent than it seems like when you're putting it on, which is okay. That's all right. We can deal with that. But like you kind of gotta keep track of that. You know, like as I'm blocking this in now, like it looks like, wow, it's like super light everywhere. But what it seems like is that as it's like drying, you know, you see like it gets considerably darker. Um, I think in general that's probably okay. Yeah, it's probably all right. It's not like my favorite thing in the world. Like, I mean, if I just applied it and it just stayed exactly the same, that would be more to my liking. But I think that this is within like a margin of error that's probably okay. I'm trying, by the way, not to leave behind like a lot of like sharp or kind of hard edges. As I block in, like a good kind of general rule is, just keep your edges a little bit softer. And in this instance, that just means like uh, not like, just kind of feathering the edge a little bit. I mean, I'm not like making transitions or making soft edges or anything. I'm just trying my best to not um, like totally like leave behind some crazy edge. So that's great advice. Don't totally leave behind crazy edges. You can put that in the book of famous quotes from Stephen. All right, Bluebird is asking, I know this question might be one you've heard a lot before, but how did you learn and how do you motivate yourself to continue drawing when you don't see any progression? Yeah, it is a question that I've gotten several times, and talked about before, but there's always like a new kind of version of that answer, especially when I'm just like live streaming, kind of riffing about stuff. Um, but how do I stay like motivated? That's an interesting one. I think like for professional artists, I have noticed there's like this like commonality that we like go through this phase, usually about like maybe 5, 6 years after we get out of school, where we start like questioning like what does it all mean, like why am I even doing this? Because you get into the business of art and it's like you realize, oh, it's like every other business in the world. Like there's people that are in it to make a buck, and there's people that are in it because they love it, and those are only sometimes are those two things like aligned with each other. Usually the people that want to make a buck are making a buck off of the people that do it for love, and so inherently there's a little bit of a jolt, I think, when people find out that that's the case. Not like every gallerist is like just an art lover who wants to facilitate the creation of and spread of great artwork. Um, that they're in business, and that's okay. Like that's, by the way, it's totally fine. That's what you want your gallerist to be. You want your gallerist to want to make a good living, because that means that also you will do so. Um, but like I said, I feel like it's a little bit of a shock sometimes, and so you get this tendency for people to lose steam, maybe lose a little bit of motivation, also at a certain point after graduation. So, and for me, like I definitely came across that point, but I also find that at a certain point for me, and this is the privilege of you know the choices that I made, which are basically like I was either going to do this or I wasn't going to do anything. That's a sacrifice, but also what it gives you is that eventually, like making paintings and stuff is like it's just a habit. It's a lifestyle that you have, and it would be the same as like how do you stay motivated to get up and go to work? Well, it's like it's my job, it's what I do. So if I was questioning it every day, like how do I get up and do this? I'd probably find more reasons not to than reasons to do it. But I love the community of artists that I work with, and I love solving new things. I think for me, like also, it's just a quirk of my own like personality, is that I've always been really interested about like how to make something work essentially. Like each medium is like its own kind of problem, in the sense that getting form to turn in graphite is like a totally different enterprise than getting form to turn in egg tempera, for instance. And because of that, it offers like a different kind of challenge, and that is something that fascinates me and something that really motivates me as well. So I think that probably some version of like how I stay motivated is just staying interested and staying challenged. You know, there's that great saying that like the worst thing that you can do is aim too low and actually achieve your ultimate goal. Because at that point, of course, like, you know, where do you go after that? Like, if you've already kind of done what you wanted to do, you know, there's not a lot kind of remaining, like not a lot of challenge. And I think that probably a lot of people out there, myself included, we respond to challenges. We like a challenge, you know, because it gives you that feeling of accomplishment when you've actually kind of gotten somewhere. Yeah, so that's the long-winded version of how that works. Nathan Schultz is asking, I know you said watercolor is not something you know enough about to teach it. Is egg tempera in that category as well? Already looks great. This medium is intriguing. With tempera painting, in a way, it's a little bit more like, so like properly, and I'll tell you why, like why I say what I say about watercolor. Like watercolor done right means that you're doing everything like transparently, right? So that your highlights are the paper. Like that's ultimately where you need to be with proper watercolor painting. And so like I think you need to have like a really solid predictive understanding of like where things are going, how they're going to work. You know, if you're going to achieve a result, and certainly if you're teaching, you know, it's an empirical thing. It's about telling people this will work, not like maybe, or try this out. And so that's why I wouldn't do watercolor. With this, I feel like it's a little bit more like, almost like gouache, in the sense that you know, you're painting opaquely, and you're okay with like painting over stuff, and yeah, so I think the result is a lot more value based. It's a lot more like maybe like, you know, quite normal opaque painting, you know. So yes, I think I could and will shed light on certainly my tempera process, and you know, how I think about and how I go about things here. Really, in a lot of ways, it's not going to be too dissimilar actually to how I would oil paint something. What I do love about it, by the way, not that anybody asked, but the thing that I'm always quite intrigued by is that you know, because like it dries so fast, you can layer it over and over and over and over itself 100 times in a single painting session. And what that means essentially is that you can develop what I would refer to as micro textures, right? So one little square inch can be made of like 1,000 different like hatch marks. That like totally blows my mind, because it's an effect that I love, even in oil paint, and it's so hard in oil paint, and very few oil painters do anything like this. But they manage to make these small areas that are really really unified, also like sparkle with detail. It's the coolest thing ever. If you get to look at Jules Bastien Lepage's Joan of Arc that is at the Metropolitan Museum in New York, if you get to look at that painting, you know, it's just full everywhere of these like micro textures inside of, you know, quite unified values. So it's really, really, it's obviously one of my favorite paintings. One day I'll have to do a What We Love About, which is like a kind of art appreciation show that I do. I'll have to do one about Lepage and about Joan of Arc. Probably have to have my wife on for that one, because she's equally a fan of that painting. So let's see here. By the way, everybody watching on YouTube, If you are subscribed, fantastic. Give a like to this video, please. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. Those things just give me like incentive to do more streams. So if you enjoy the content at all, just liking and subscribing is hugely beneficial to me, just in terms of growing the channel and making it more and more useful for me to like kind of get out there and make more videos. But let's see. Oh, more questions coming in. Right. Shubham Sharma is asking how to choose an underpaint. I think what we're referring to here is like how to choose an underpainting color. If you're talking about like an oil paint, then that's going to mean that you want something that's quite fast drying. So usually what people will use is some combination of like raw umber or like umber and lead white. So there's a couple different things you can do to get a good underpainting color. You also want something that's probably a bit neutral. I mean, that's just from my process, I would usually want something a bit neutral. Whether or not you want exactly that or not, you know, that's up to you. But for me, that would be a criteria I would think about as well. So nothing too chromatic, and probably something that dries quite fast. If you're doing it in other mediums, like in a way, like technically, this is kind of what I'm doing is kind of an underpainting. In that, like I intend to go over this later with and add color to it and things. Provided like that this stage goes really well. If I do this stage and I realize like this painting's terrible, then probably I wouldn't go further with it. But we'll see. Yeah, so that's my my take on that one. Right, and look at this. You see how light this side is and how dark this one is. This is that drying effect, right? Evaporation, drying, darkening as it goes. But the cool thing is that highlight sticks around, so I can really kind of build on that highlight and make sure I keep my lightest areas kind of as light as they need to be, which was always the problem with gouache. Gouache is like, if you're painting opaquely with gouache, and you know what, there's some people out there that do amazing work with gouache, and they work opaquely and they do it. The thing that always bummed me out is I always felt like I would paint with gouache and it would be like the whites, like I would try to block in something white and it would be like really drab and it would darken. So eventually for me that was like, you know, I was through trying to make paintings like this with gouache. So that's what that is. Other questions. MJ's saying, how can we use our long form drawings to help our quick sketches and vice versa? How can you use your long form your drawings to help? Well, I mean, I guess long form drawings help build different kinds of skills that can be advantageous to use when you're sketching, which is to say, like, you're developing your ability to like see values well, right? Like that's something that obviously is very important when you're sketching, but you're not going to use, like, for instance, like the skills you build rendering, right? Like rendering form and things is not, well, you're not going to be engaged in the same way with that doing quick sketch as you are when you're doing kind of a long form drawing. So it's more like your ability to like organize and understand organization so that you can do it like a lot more efficiently. I think that's how one tends to like inform the other. Right, let's see. Kamlika is saying, just joined. How does egg tempera compare to linseed oil? It dries way faster and is not as, like, I guess blendable is the word that you'd use to kind of describe what you can do with linseed oil and like oil-based paints. This, by the way, is like a pre-tubed egg tempera that I'm using, so it's not I mean, it's using, it has a similar effect to egg tempera. The actual manufacture of it, of course, is quite different. Just got to take a look at some of the drawing issues here. See if I can make this thing work. Which hopefully the answer is yes, right? Like if I can't, then this is going to be a terrible streaming experience for everybody involved. So let's see. I think like I'm wondering if I need to like key up some of these areas or key down some of the areas around the edges. You'll probably wind up doing a little bit of both. Let's see. Yeah, Kamlik was also asking some questions about like a comparison between like traditional egg tempera and like some of the contemporary ones, like the Sennelier one that I'm using, for instance, whether or not you can anticipate cracking. Yeah, I mean, if you're using any kind of inflexible medium on any kind of flexible support, then for sure there is the possibility for cracking. That definitely is going to be the case. But it also probably has to do with like the thickness of the paint, like how you're applying it. There's a lot of different kind of variables in there. I think, obviously, I think that eventually, like I'll be safe in my project here. But it's one of those things like time will tell. A lot of people have like a lot of different ideas about mediums, and the answer in the end is just, well, time will tell, unless it's already been like tested empirically. I know that George and Tatiana out at Natural Pigments, they do a lot of and I'm sure like a lot of paint companies, they do a lot of like testing of their materials for light fastness and flexibility and issues that affect paint film. As I'm sure like a lot of these guys or a lot of these people that worked at Sennelier must have done for this pre-tubed egg tempera. Right, so Remy is saying it's coming along great. Looks a lot like an inking process. Yeah, I think in a way like it is like that. It's not so much like with oil paint. Of course, you'd be kind of unifying things, blending things a lot more. But this is going to be definitely composed of a lot of like hatch marks in a way. And eventually there'll probably be just a little bit of like proper modeling of form in it as well, like actually like kind of blending things, but that'll be I think considerably later on in the process. For now, it's just about getting everything on here, establishing some decent values, and like kind of getting the sense of form like starting to work, which is definitely no guarantee working with mediums that kind of dry so fast as this. Hopefully I don't mess it up, right? By the way, if you did miss yesterday's stream, it is up on Patreon and on YouTube. You can find it in either place. So if you're already a Patreon subscriber, it's there in your feed. And if you're not and you want to be, there's a link in the description of this video. And if you're not a subscriber there and you don't want to be, then it's also available on YouTube for now. But yeah, just so you know, you can catch the drawing, the block-in phase as well. Let's see. Ross Manson is saying, "Hi Stephen, any tips on painting palette management? Usually if I try painting, my palette ends up a mess. And can you tell the hat story again?" The hat story is a one-time only feature. But in terms of like palette organization, halfway through, and I mentioned this actually in one of my tutorials, I say that like palette fatigue is a thing, right? Like halfway through your session, especially when you're oil painting, like you get to this place where your palette is just an absolute hot mess. And the only thing to do is just to grab your palette knife and kind of scrape down and, you know, just get rid of the mess, refresh it a little bit. And the cool thing about oil paint is, of course, that it's, you know, maintains its kind of wetness and stuff throughout the process. What I was really concerned about here, actually, was that my tempera was all going to, like, dry up on my palette, and that, like, it was going to, like, halfway through the filming, I was going to have this, like, just totally unuseful, unworkable paint. But so far, that has not been the case. But basically, yeah, you just get your palette knife halfway through your painting and just get in there and get rid of the mess. Like, that's really all you can do about that. Yeah, it's got some black on my brush here, so I got some cool, literally cool temperatures to kind of interject into it. My feeling is that actually, like, I wouldn't mind if the tempera flowed a little bit more easily. Like, it gets quite, like, viscous quite quickly. So that makes it a little bit harder to manipulate than I would prefer. But I mean, some of that stuff is just like, that's the medium, like, you know. That's like, you know, it's like oil paint. Oh, I wish it dried faster. Well, beyond like getting a fast drying medium, like, that's just what oil paint is. It doesn't dry fast. So, you know, you need to like make peace with that kind of. So let's see. Kamlik, I was saying, oil medium was a natural and welcome evolution from oils. It's interesting to see tempera make a comeback. Curious to try. Yeah, I think it's a cool. I think it's a pretty interesting medium. For the reasons I mentioned. I think that, you know, has this really high ceiling in terms of like textures and cool like visual stuff that you can do with it. And whenever that's a possibility, like, I'm always going to be on board with a material like that. Yeah, I've got to get this bit of this sternocleidomastoid kind of coming down here. I think I probably need to also like start to take a wash of like slightly darker value into the painting, so I can start to understand a little bit more the overall like sense of contrast in the picture. If I can do that, then we can really kind of get on a roll here. It's like, well, some of this stuff like seems dark right now. Like, when I start to darken the shadows even more, it's gonna be closer to feeling like, oh, that's the right value overall. I think the trick is not to like jump the gun on that, you know, like it's easy to get like you know, I talk so much about like in my teaching about like restraint, you know, like I think we're always as painters, we're always like a little bit more we think we're a little bit more ready than we are, like, in general. So just kind of holding back on the throttle a little bit is usually a very, very useful thing to do. Just want to build up some more opacity in these lights, so we get that sense of form that we're looking for. That's through like layers and layers, and I mean that's what I expected of it, you know. So it's not like surprising to me at all that that's the case here. What I do like is you get some of these like nice lyrical brush strokes when you're doing this, you know. I think that's a pretty cool feature of working in tempera. It's like the personality and like character of your brush strokes is really, really apparent. Which, you know, with oil paint, you know, because it blends so much, you don't like get as much of a feeling of that. Let's see. Nathan Schultz is saying, also put together like 6 of my first stretched paper boards. Your video is invaluable. Yes, once you start stretching paper, Nathan, you never go back after that. Like, that's it's such a satisfying like surface to work on. Excuse me. So Kelsey Fisher is watching the YouTube stream, and obviously saw my comment about her mug. Actually, she gave a mug when Jersey City, when we left Jersey City and we left the Florence Academy. Kelsey gave both of us mugs, just as a kind of I guess a going away gift. I use both of them actually. They're really great tea mugs. And though Cornelia appreciates hers in spirit, I think that she prefers other coffee cups. Yeah, she's in the other room, hearing me say that and disagreeing. So
You just give me tea with the other coffee mug.
so all right. Danish Kamran is asking what colors I'm using. It's titanium white, yellow ochre, burnt sienna, and ivory black. Let's see. There's a couple repeated questions. Let's see. Sorry, I'm just reading through the questions to try to get to him. This is definitely not CAD red. Yeah, somebody was commenting about that. Ali Kawaz says, by the way, I was really delighted the other day when you checked my drawing on Instagram after your skull drawing theme. Yeah, so like I do, in general, I do a lot of live streams that are like skull sketching. If you want a good excuse to get some skull practice in, then those live streams are for you. Just subscribe to the channel and you'll get notified when I'm doing a stream, and you can get that practice in. You know, it's all about the hours. Well, it's a lot about the hours. Not all about the hours. There's other aspects as well, but the hours spent drawing definitely don't hurt your progress. Let's see. Bro Rafa. Oh wait, no, sorry. There's another question somewhere in here. MJ was asking what's my process for making videos on Patreon. Depends. Sometimes like they're really super like pointed, in the sense that like I have one that like an ongoing series. I have like kind of several ongoing series really, of like different concepts. So I'm doing a series of like features, right? So I did one of the human eye. The next one that I have on the list is very likely going to be the nose. So I think there's a lot of like really specific structure there that's going to be useful to talk about. And but if not, like sometimes like I'm just working on a project, or I have like an idea for a project that has a medium that's like really specific, like the one I did on sepia chalk, right? Like if some of you have seen that one on my Patreon channel, then you'll know like there's all this like really specific information about like how to draw in sepia chalk. So sometimes the medium is kind of asking for it, or like I have a project that I want to do that I think will like apply and will really like people really benefit from. And then sometimes it's like more like a subject matter that I feel like just needs to be covered. Like if you're a student, you gotta know about, you gotta like build up a knowledge base about, the human eye, for instance. Like the more you know about it, the easier it is to like, understand and thus like kind of document what you're seeing. So that's kind of my process, and it varies. What I'm doing lately that I actually really kind of like, actually, is getting into making like a series of informational lectures, so that there's like so much like background. So if I just say like shadows, atmosphere, and light is form, there's like 15 years of like working with that concept to talk about. Because it's I think the lessons you learn in representational art are in general like they're quite broad, they're quite deep, and they require a lot of like unpacking, because there's so many different situations, that that can kind of influence how that principle will work. So yeah, so my process is kind of I try to keep it a little bit open just so I like stay invested and interested, but also try and like kind of maintain a structure because there's such a background of things that people I think really need to know to do this stuff well. So try to be a little bit of everywhere at once. Sometimes it works the right way. Sometimes I'm distracted. Let's see. Let's see. Philip Luthi is saying, "Hi Stephen, I noticed your signature in some of your framed work is not visible. Is that an aesthetic choice?" Signature framed works is not visible. It's an interesting question. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, in general, I don't. It's not like a conscious thing. You might. I do actually sign all my work, so I'm not sure which work you're talking about. Maybe it was like a mock-up of something that you saw, but no, it's not an aesthetic choice. Doug Ferron is saying, "Is it with you created your own pigment with egg yolk?" No, it's not. It's pre-made by Sennelier. MJ says your block-ins are more detailed than what we see more in atelier schools. Yeah, probably they are. I mean, the thing that you're seeing, of course, in a lot of atelier schools is like a lot of, student work. And I think as you grow in painting and drawing, not that things change so much, but I think you're able to handle a little bit more probably than you were kind of at the start. So I think that's probably what is behind this effect that you're describing. That it seems like there's kind of more going on in my paintings or my block-ins. Sorry. So I'm just need to like fix a little bit some of the proportions here. There's some width issues. This is really kind of cool gesture that runs down here and like cuts in under the chin. And then on the other side, because gravity is kind of tilting that way, it's like this kind of rounder, softer form. So I wanted to make sure that I got a hold of that. Now I'm going to dive into some of these shadow shapes and maybe start to get just a little bit more specific. Yeah, so far like no disaster. so that's a good thing. Although I feel like it'd be nice if I could like spread the paint like a little bit more easily. I do kind of have to like hatch a little bit of everything because it's not naturally like a medium that gives you any softness. So the only softness that you're going to get is by like kind of dispersing your marks. Which is kind of like somebody mentioned earlier, it's kind of like looked like inking, which yeah, I definitely get that vibe from it as well. Which is not a bad one, just it is just a fact of the medium that you got to deal with. Yeah. So let's see. Velga Al Rasid is asking, what do you think of Rust-Oleum as a spray primer for wood panels? I cannot speak to that at all. A lot of times experimentation is just about longevity. If it's not as important to you that your work lasts forever, then you can try a lot of different things. I mean, maybe Rust-Oleum is great, but it's like, to my mind, it's a kind of commercial product that is made for like painting and repainting surfaces, whereas like a lot of fine art products have been tested for like longevity. So I would tend to trust something more. And I think, like, by the way, it's not there's no shortage of different primers for panels. So for me personally, like, I just wouldn't do it because I feel like I couldn't promise the longevity of it, which in a way is like a little bit, about like pricing your art. Like, so artwork is like a precious thing. It's a luxurious thing. You know, without getting into the specifics of it, like if you buy an artwork of mine, it's not inexpensive. And in order to charge that, part of it is I have to be able to say like, this thing is going to last forever. Like it's not, you're not going to buy it and then like a year later it's like cracking off the surface of the panel. And that's at the heart of, to my mind, is at the heart of like why archivability is such a big issue for painters, for artists, is you need to be able to say to clients that this thing is going nowhere. It's totally secure. Let's see. Bernard Chua is asking where he can learn more about traditional art and classical realism methods. Funny that you should ask that, Bernard. I run an educational website devoted exclusively to those subjects. So check the link in the description of this video, and you'll be able to get to that website and get to that information. Sorry, I'm kind of like the offshoot of this being an experiment is that I'm like super focused on what I'm doing, and so I kind of forget that I'm chatting with you guys sometimes. Listen to that, I can't even talk right. Let's see. Edward, who has a name that unfortunately I cannot pronounce the last name at all, says, do you know Amaya Grappida? And if yes, do you have something to say about the difference in her approach from yours? The difference between particularly a painterly and a drawing approach. Yeah, like Amaya, I worked with Amaya at the Florence Academy for 4 years. Yeah, I know her very well. I'm not sure if I know exactly like the difference you mean in the approach. In some ways our approach is not really vastly different, but maybe there's something you're referring to that that I don't know exactly about. But in terms of like being painterly versus being into drawing, maybe you're talking about kind of like structural versus visual, but and that my approach maybe like hers would be more visual. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not actually. Unfortunately, I'm not really sure. I totally agree with the question that our approaches are all that different. From what I know, working with her, like I said, they're not the same, but they're not. I don't think they're that different either. No offense. I mean, I'm sure there's something at the bottom of that question, but I'm going to move on to another one. Daniel Morris says, other than the outline format, how have you changed most in what you actually teach between when you taught the Florence Academy versus what you teach on Patreon? Yeah, cool question. A lot of it's very much the same, except for the fact that I feel like I've added some other things, right? So if you study at the Florence Academy, you are going to be really focused a lot on like 2D shape design. And that's really cool. It can take you a really long way. But in my estimation, it is not, well, no, I mean, I'm not even my estimation. The truth is, that's not really the whole story. And it's a reason why there's like other schools of thought about this. And the reason why like the Florence Academy method works so well is because if you're working in site size, this can be like super effective. If you're not working in site size, however, I think that there's, and in general, actually, I think that there's much more efficient ways to go about drawing and understanding like structure and form. So what I've done essentially, or what I've added to my teaching since leaving the academy, is a much stronger sense of like three-dimensional structure. So instead of 2D shape design, talking more about structure and form, which, to be fair, is not absent from the Florence Academy approach. It's just also not at the forefront. And so that would be I think the main thing that I've, that I think is different. I'm sure actually if I really took the time, I could kind of come up with several things as well, but that's the start. Oh, there's this weird quirk on YouTube's comment section, is that like once you start scrolling, it like kind of pops. Anyway, whatever. It's kind of inconvenient. But Agostina Caruso says, "Hey, what a beauty your classes. How do you broadcast with a red frame on Instagram?" Oh, someone's asked. Yeah, so like I'm doing a simulcast on Instagram, which is actually technically not possible. But there's just like hacks to it. And this one in particular, it's not so much that it's a red frame. It's I'm actually just filming my YouTube live stream. So it's not really technically that complicated. But you got to have like the right gear and setup. Honestly, one day I should do like a whole video series on just like all the gear that you need if you're trying to do what I'm doing, because it's definitely like there's definitely a learning curve when I went into kind of doing this. I've been making tutorial videos for a couple of years, almost a few years now. And man, when I started, you could write a book about the stuff I didn't know or I wasn't expecting. And maybe one day it will be useful for me to do that. In any event, right, Victor Pieri was asking what paper do you use and how do you tone it. To be fair to everybody else, I have talked about it a few times. It's Stonehenge paper, and I stretch it and I tone it with ink. If you're interested in doing exactly what I do, I do have a tutorial out on Patreon about it, with all the materials and links and stuff. So I would definitely, point you to that in terms of the specifics of exactly what I do, and then I would move on to the next question. Let's see. JD Anarchy is asking, how much do you practice with gesture? How much does it take? How much practice with gesture does it take to become proficient? There's some missing data in that question, I think, which is like, what is your overall proficiency in drawing as of this moment? If you're very adept at drawing, then it can be less. If you're just a beginner in drawing, then it can take a lot. So unfortunately, can't like totally answer like how many reps it takes in a general sense. But I would just say that a fairly consistent and constant attention to that subject will be necessary to become, really, I think, really proficient at something. I mean, proficiency is in a way, like quite a high bar in my estimation. When school programs will take 3 years for you to graduate, I mean, it's possible even to go those 3 years and not be totally proficient in doing something. The proof, it's one of those things where like the proof is in the design, and there's no like formula to that. I remember, for me, I think the refreshing thing about like arts education, as I experienced it, was really that, not that it's a meritocracy, because I mean, it's not exactly that, but that really it's just about kind of like what you can do. Like if you can paint something, then it's quite evident, you can paint it. And if you're conversely, if you're not able to, then well, then we see it in the result. In that sense, it's very tangible, and so that's you got to take a certain amount of joy in the tangibility of your achievement or of your struggle. It's not so mysterious, and that can be frustrating at times. probably be nice sometimes to be a little bit unaware of how much you're struggling when you're studying painting and drawing. But sometimes or most times it's kind of painfully clear what the case is. Yeah, so I think the painting is rounding out a little bit here. It's getting somewhere interesting. I don't know like how much I'm gonna do yet of like a kind of like a background. If I'm gonna get into that really at all. But there's some cool kind of relationships starting to appear. But by the way, plenty of stuff to do. Oh my goodness. Um, just looking down at like the lower half of the face, I'm like, oh my god. A lot of stuff to do there. Let's see. Sanika Mestri is asking, do you have to be, quote, learned from art academy artists to be an art teacher? Well, that's an interesting question. Um, well, yeah, I mean, I want to be fair to everybody, like, in answering that. I don't want to say, like, oh, you can't do this if you, I mean, obviously there are going to be, like, exceptions out there. But I think in general, what you do get from an academy trained teacher is you get somebody who has I think, at the very least, what do I want to say here? Their approach has been tested like empirically, and they have experienced a dialogue with trained artists and trained instructors. So it's just a little bit of like background there, just in terms of like how things should work in a way to be efficient, because it's very hard to learn to paint, and there's a lot of struggle that can be avoided, I think, if you have a good approach. And so, at the very least, with an academy trained instructor, you're going to have like a lineage, I guess is the word I want to look for. It sounds like really overcooked, but you're working with somebody who has worked with other people that have worked with other people. It's kind of a generational, like, passed down thing. The practices have been refined over the years. Whereas if you're working with somebody who's really just made it up themselves, they know very well what works for them, but that might not work for you. And so you might get this feeling like, oh, maybe I'm just not good at this thing. But really, maybe you just need a more structured approach. So it just kind of depends upon the teacher a little bit. Like, there's some people that are like really intuitive and organized and so on. And I think probably you have a very good experience working with them. If you're working with somebody who's not, doesn't have those characteristics, maybe it can be more of a challenge. So kind of depends. A lot of variables there. So tough to give like a really crystal clear answer about it. I don't think you have to be. I can say that, but I know from my experience, I've worked with both, and obviously I learned a lot coming to the academy. Right. Victor Pierre is asking, you talked about stretching paper. How do you do it, and what's the benefit of doing it? The how do you do it? Like I said, I made a tutorial about the process, so I'm gonna refer you to that. It's on my Patreon. But the benefits of it, I think there's numerous benefits. Some of them are really just about like it's a nice and pleasant place to work. Other ones are regarding like how you can actually frame the work, So there's kind of several things I think that are pretty cool about it, but it's also one of those things where it's like once you start doing it, it's going to be immediately apparent to you, like why it's so cool. So um, I'll just refer you to the video about how to do it, and then say that the reasons are numerous that it's kind of cool and interesting to do. Beyond which, like, how cool is it to like work on stretched paper? Like that's like it's really uh, like kind of novel, like beautiful appearance, and that's a good thing. So I'm just focused on kind of building up some of these highlights. Again, in terms of the egg temper, if there was a thing that if it did better, I would be a little bit happy was, I guess, to carry the value from the palette to the canvas a little bit better. Which is to say, like, I'm painting this on really light now. It's not going to be that light when it dries. So I kind of have to like guess a little bit what it's going to dry as. And so that is maybe just a little bit of a bummer. But like every medium has every rose has its thorn. Every medium has its things that are not so fun about it. Right, let's see. Victor Pieri, no, let's see. Emilio Asis is saying, "Hi, Stephen. I'm wondering if I join your Patreon, is there a way I can get some feedback on my homework?" Sorry, I just lost the question. Or the, he says the courses that you deliver, but I think that's a typo. The courses I deliver. Yeah, all right. So, in one sense, yes. Like I do offer like one-on-one instruction. But because I am only one human being, obviously I can only offer that to so many people, and those places are not usually available. Like it's quite rare that one opens up, and then you kind of have to like be there to find it. Something I want to do, and it really just depends upon time, is I want to start making like group critique videos for my tutorials. Now, what this means though for me is like I need to open up some production time. So I think what's going to happen eventually, right? And for those of you that are already subscribed to my Patreon, this is for you guys. So listen up. What I want to do is I'm going to take a month and I'm going to say like, all right, guys and girls, there's not going to be a tutorial that I come up with this month. Like I'm not going to make a new tutorial project, but I'm going to do like a group critique of like subscriber works. And so I'll make a couple of those in the month. And then that way, where you might not be able to receive criticism on your work specifically, a lot of the challenges, a lot of the things that we mess up, we tend to mess up similar to the way other people do. And so these group critiques would be a way that you could kind of get into that mindset and get that sense of like some kind of feedback at least about the perils of that particular project. So that is what I can offer like in general. I've also thought of doing like maybe, and let me know what you think of this. This is like a thought I've had. I've been trying to like solve this problem for a while because I recognize, of course, that getting feedback is a huge game changer in terms of like education for people. I've thought of doing like group critique classes where I can put out an assignment. Everybody does that assignment, brings it back, and then I'll go through and like kind of critique several works. Like so, like in a setting where there'd be like 10 or 15 people in that class, I could do a critique that maybe wouldn't. Maybe it would. I would try to include everybody's work, but maybe maybe I'd only get to like 5 or 6 of the works because you can talk quite in depth about things. And then that would serve as a way to like get you feedback on your project, like on a shared project, because you're all kind of doing it together. if you like that idea, you think it's kind of a cool idea, you'd like to take part in that, let me know in the comments, let me know in the chat, because like obviously I would have to do like a lot of work to kind of set something like that up, and I don't want to like set it up if nobody's really interested in doing that. Um, so really, it's you guys hold the key. If that's something that's interesting to you, potentially I could like open up a tier on Patreon that would be, in a way, like group lessons. I guess is probably what you'd call it, or yeah, something like that. So let me know. Let me know in the comments. Right. Let's see. Inji Usama is saying, what can I do if I can't find lead or zinc white oil color? I think you just got to paint with titanium. I mean, listen, I painted for years with titanium. And it's not like it can't be done. It's just there's some qualities of it that you have to like work against a little bit, and that can be a bummer. But it's not, for sure, it's not impossible. Plenty of people do it. I did it. If you got to do it, then just go for it, and just get on with it. There's not really a way to make your titanium white like behave like other pigments. So just learn to deal with it as you can. Yeah, which is not really advice. It's just like that's just just how it is sometimes. It's parts of the world where like you can, like in Europe, technically speaking, like you can't buy lead white, even though like there's ways to get it. Hopefully nobody's like watching this video that works at an agency that polices that, but yeah, anyway. Someone is saying my face cam is frozen. That's not good. Wonder how long that's been happening. Why is that the case? All right, sorry people, like some technical issues I gotta fix here before we figure out what's going on. Yeah, sorry, guys, just gonna be a second while I'm figuring out this or problem solving this particular issue. We'll see if this kind of goes anywhere. Otherwise, I think I probably just gotta like cancel the stream because I can't. Don't know if I can really do anything about that. Or is it fixed? I think it's fixed. All right, you can let me know in the comments if that's fixed. Hopefully it is. I think it is. It's fixed on my feed anyway, so hopefully that's okay. All right, QP is asking, how could you be sure about the archivability quality? Most companies nowadays are changing formulas due to limited supplies or price points. It's actually hard to test this. Yeah, no, he's talking about the archivability of different paints. It's about manufacturers you trust. Like if you talk to the people that run Rublev colors, for instance, and natural pigments, they're people that are really not like sacrificing on archivability. So you kind of have to like know your sources a bit. Like that company, for instance, like for sure like that they're going to be taking care of business on their end, and also like Chelsea Classical Studios is another company that I kind of trust pretty well. All right. Yeah. So sorry about that technical issue. By the way, it's unavoidable. Happens sometimes. But I think we're going to be just fine because it looks like it's fixed on my end. But I guess that this live stream is going to have a section where I look like I'm not doing anything. Let's see. Agostina Caruso is saying, thanks. What artists do you think work from life but don't have the correct ideas? that you named yesterday. Wow, did I say that people are working from life but don't have the right ideas? I certainly wouldn't go as far as to like call anybody out. And right and wrong is a bit relative here. Like if you're getting a result, is somebody going to say, "Oh, that's wrong"? I mean, you kind of just have to look at the paintings, as kind of proof, or the drawings as proof. In a way, like, I mean, sure that there's some things you can say like, probably that's not a good idea, but for the most part, there's truth is a little bit of a relative subject when it comes to like painting. If your painting works really well, it's hard to say that that's like the wrong approach. If your painting doesn't work really well, that's okay. It can, everybody has like a bad day every now and again. Like, you can look at some of my paintings and go like, that doesn't look right. But like in general, I think you just look for, people that are working consistently and intelligently, and doing their best to demystify the process. Like for students, it is about demystifying, but eventually, like, you can't really demystify like art making, right? Like it's kind of that, like, it when you see it kind of thing. Like if it moves you, it moves you, and then that's kind of the answer. So it's hard to like put that in a formula and teach it. Like, and that's what I'm saying about, like, with teachers, like I do try to put everything in a way as much as possible like into a formula, because reality is there's a lot for a student to kind of try and grasp, and so you need to like understand like big kind of formulaic concepts if you're going to kind of get good at this stuff. So formularizing things is not bad in and of itself. In fact, if you know the painter Solomon J. Solomon, there's a quote. I do this all the time with quotes. There's like a great quote by Solomon J. Solomon. I have to paraphrase it because I don't exactly remember what it is. But he said like something to the effect of like, in art making, or if you're a professional artist and you don't have like a formula for making your art, that's ridiculous. Meaning that basically, like, if you're trying to improvise every single time you make an artwork, like, you're never gonna be as like consistent and effective enough to like actually be a professional artist, which in some ways is true. People ask a lot about like, oh, like, what about, how do I have a style, and what is this style, and what do I do about style? In a way, like, professional artists and galleries for sure will tell you this as well. They want you to be like very consistent, and part of that style sense is like a sense of consistency. Like when you look at a Brad Kunkel painting, it's just no mystery that who it is. It's like every time you know exactly who it is, and so part of that is is like having just a sense of consistency in your process and your aesthetic, but you have to kind of shape that a bit like over years. It's not like there's no like free pass to it. You just got to work and work and work and work and try your best to kind of understand yourself and what you're doing, just getting to know like what you like, what are your tastes in a way. But I digress as usual. Let's see. AC. All right, no. Brett Colonel says, for the Rembrandt challenge, I used similar colors in gouache on tan tone paper and actually enjoyed and learned a lot from it. Yeah, very cool. Let's see if there's another question here. AC is asking, I'm not very good yet at drawing portraits, and I'm not sure if I should do a workshop because I'm not sure if I'm talented enough. Will it not be a waste of time? Can anyone learn? There are learnable aspects to painting and drawing, and you can be very confident about that fact. Eventually, right? Eventually, those learnable factors, those learnable aspects, are what leads to, right, the things that maybe that people actually question themselves about, like, am I like really an artist? like do I have to have like a vision. You know, this is what people kind of wonder about. Um, that stuff. I mean, I'm not saying it can't be broached through teaching, but it's kind of that's where the empirical falls away a little bit, and you can rely maybe slightly more on feeling. But there's a long way before you get to feeling. There's a lot of thinking to do before you get to like just reacting and reading and responding with feeling. I mean, or let's just say like I think that there is always room for that kind of intuitive operation. Um, but like we're talking about like expression, like real expression in painting, I feel like that's a very complicated subject. Like you wouldn't think that you could compose a piece of music like Beethoven just because you learned to play the piano. So I think with art and artistic expression, I kind of have a very high bar set for that in my estimation. So yeah, your question. Sorry, this is like that's digression right there. Your question was, would it be a waste of time to take a workshop? Probably not. I mean, you're kind of gaining knowledge and practice, and workshops are a great way to stay motivated and learn new things. So yeah, I don't think that often having a new experience and kind of learning new things, I don't think that would be a waste of time. I think it'd be a good use of your time. Let's see. MJ is asking any tips for simplifying when you're at the linear phase of the drawing. Any tips for simplifying? Well, straight lines, in a way, they necessitate or lead to a kind of simplification. Like if you're committed to using straight lines in your work, necessarily you will be simplifying things. So getting used to working in straight lines, I think, is the tip that I would give. Because otherwise, it's just about like kind of training your intuition to kind of think in those terms, to think in straight lines. Sorry, I got an itch on my back. You have to kind of learn to think in those straight lines. So yeah, just always working in straight lines. That'll do well for you. Conceiving of something as a straight line, not kind of relenting and just using curves and making things complex. Probably a little bit too early, you know. Restraint is a really great way to describe that process. Let's see. Daniel Morris is asking, why do you personally prefer drawing over painting? Your wife perhaps prefers painting more. Looking at your content differences on both your Patreon. The cool question. I think that, why do I prefer drawing more? Yeah, I think, well, drawing is a very, like, I feel like it's almost like engineering in a way. It's like you're so focused on like, well, no, I take back the engineering thing. What I really love in drawing is the way that you're like stripping things away from what you see. It's a very stark, a very sparing and Spartan kind of view of the visual world. It changes things. It almost creates like a metaphor for vision. In a way, like a drawing looks actually nothing like reality, because we see reality, of course, in color. And I think that difference, that divergence, artistically, I think is very fascinating to me. It's almost like a black and white movie, as opposed to, being in full color. So that I think is one of the things that really draws me to it. Is that sense of an altered reality. Of course, paint can do that too. It's not that paint cannot have that, but I like the kind of barren starkness of drawing. I think it's very beautiful. As for Cornelia, I think that I'm sure she will have her reasons for her preference to oil paint, which I think, by the way, is well observed. I think you could say pretty confidently that she prefers oil painting to drawing. I can ask her, Cornelia, do you prefer oil painting to drawing?
What now?
Do you prefer oil painting to drawing? I'm waiting for a response now.
I love both mediums, but I couldn't be without a color for too long.
She says she enjoys both mediums, but she could not be without color for too long. Hence her appreciation for sanguine drawing, actually. So there you go. Let's see. Gentian Quelly is saying, I've been thinking to go to the Angel Academy. I think it suits my style very much. And I'm thinking of going when you're 18. I'm so poor, so I wanted to ask you, can you work and paint? Well, that's a very enlightened question, actually, because I think with the hours that you're going to spend, the Angel Academy, by the way, is like an atelier type school in Florence, Italy. The amount of hours that you're going to be working, which is going to be at least 6 during the day, if not including an evening class, bringing it to 8 hours. And the amount of like rigorous study that's going on, I unfortunately, it's only the very few, I think, who are able to manage to work and study in that manner. So, I mean, my initial reaction is actually to say no. I don't think that you can. But I'll say instead, like, I just think it's really a profound challenge to try to do both, especially like in your first term or so. Like I remember being so exhausted at the end of the day. Like if I had to like go to work or something, I mean, wow, I would have been really beat up. And what would happen is, of course, like I would go to work, if I had to, but then I think that my work during the day would suffer. So it's more about, like how can you best learn or figure out how to do what you're trying to do. And I think that having a job on the side of that, it might be a little bit too much. Again, this is with the idea that the work hours of the Angel Academy, certainly, I think they probably operate quite similarly to the Florence Academy. But you can feel free to correct me if you know differently about that. Let's see. Some other questions coming in. Z Canup is asking, when we were starting out, we tend to look up on artists and have the impression that we could never do those artworks. Are there still nowadays artists that have that effect on you? Hey, sure, man. I mean, like, there's plenty of artists. Actually, this is interesting, maybe answer to this. I think 110%. Like, I think just about every other artist that is out there working, I would have to say that like I can't really do what they do. Like, I have plenty proficient in skills and things, but I think to like do what an artist does, like it's a whole, like I can paint. Doesn't mean I can paint a landscape like I don't know, whatever landscape painter name escapes me, but the point is, like, just because I can paint does not mean that I'm proficient in that area. Just because you can paint a great landscape doesn't mean you can paint a great portrait or vice versa. So I think that really every artist out there that's like really worked hard and built like a life work at doing what they do, I don't think I could do it. I mean, they do what they do. That's their whole deal, and they've spent so much time and effort to kind of get to that place. It'd be silly to think probably that I would be able to, or it'd be silly for me to think that I could do what they do. Right. So, oh yeah. All right. Sorry. A bunch of questions coming in. Let's see. Someone's asking about, or Seneca Mestri is asking, how much should one learn anatomy for figure drawings? Yeah, I mean, if you know me, you know that I'm a huge anatomy enthusiast, taught anatomy in Equochet for years. And I think obviously there's a massive amount of value in studying it. But it is about a little bit about like where you're at in your progression. Like if you are not able yet to like just block in a good set of proportions, I think probably anatomy is not like anatomy is not going to solve that in and of itself. And so I would just say, there's a lot that you can learn about drawing and painting before things like anatomy become like immediately like relevant to your study. So hopefully that helps a bit to answer your question there. By the way, I don't know how long we've been at this. Usually I try to keep these streams around an hour, hour and a half or something like that, but I think we're probably coming to that place. So I'll probably be wrapping this one up in a minute here. But let's see if there's any other questions. Let's see. A couple of people are saying they would love the group lessons through Patreon. So maybe that's interesting to do. Da, da, da. Let's see. Sorry, I'm just reading through like some of the questions to see what is interesting. Jay Stephen was saying, I'm a beginner painter. I have a question. Is it better to paint on wood panels or canvas? I'll just answer this by way of like maybe a larger idea. That question is unfortunately is actually incomplete, because like even first of all we have to say like what medium are we painting with, right? Like I mean I assume it's oil paint, right? I mean I don't have to be what's the word, like pedantic. I don't even know what I mean. You're probably talking about oil paint. But then we also need to know like how many layers are you painting? Like what what kind of method of oil paint are you studying? Are you doing something where you're glazing a lot? Are you doing something with a lot of impastos? Are you concerned more about performance or longevity? The list goes on and on and on about like how many different kind of data points you need to evaluate to like understand what the best version for you would be. So many different data points. And this is also like something to bear in mind when you're kind of comparing yourself to other artists and things as well. Keep this in mind, like you don't have the data points actually to compare yourself to another artist. So many variables in a life and in a career that to compare yourself to somebody else is like, it's nearly impossible to do that in an objective way. So it's almost just not really worth your time to do. It's nice to have like a benchmark and say like, this person, I really like what they do. I think it's really good what they do. I want to do as well as that, or I want to do something like that. But actually like beating yourself up because so and so is like better is, I mean, it's just apples and oranges. Anyway, I think. Right, so I think probably I'm going to wrap up the session here. I've got a couple of the things on my plate to do today, but it's nice to get that time away to do a little bit of painting, to hang out with you guys. Like I said, eventually this one will be on Patreon in some form or another, just as an edited demonstration or even as a tutorial. We'll just see like... we'll see where it goes and see what the interest is and stuff. If you love watching this stuff, please like and subscribe. Like the video, subscribe to this channel. It really helps me out to kind of get a bigger presence on YouTube and therefore do more of this stuff. If you're interested in learning about portrait drawing and painting and oil and in graphite and charcoal and stuff, my Patreon page is there. $5 or $10 gets you access to all this like 180 hours of content. So visit me there. And just thank you so much, everybody, for watching me have this like massive experiment and just see if it works. But again, thanks for watching, everyone.